The wars of the future won't be fought over oil. They'll be fought over water. And in these 12 cities, the war is already lost. See, while everyone has doom scrolling Zillow looking for their dream home with a pool and a view of the mountains, a quiet crisis is unfolding beneath their feet. Aquifers are collapsing. Rivers are drying up. And cities that were never supposed to exist in the first place are finally getting the memo from Mother Nature. 2030 isn't a deadline. It's a tombstone. We're not talking about some distant, hypothetical climate scenario. We're talking about cities where the taps are already sputtering, where water bills have tripled, where your swimming pool isn't a luxury anymore, it's a liability, and where your property value is about to evaporate right along with your water supply. You bought a house in the desert during a mega drought. What did you think was going to happen? This isn't surface level. We're counting down 12 U.S. cities plus one terrifying international warning that are running out of water before the decade ends, ranked by how close they are to day zero. From agricultural collapse to saltwater poisoning to cities literally sinking into the earth. Trust me, you're not ready for what's next. Let's break it down. Number 12. Lincoln, Nebraska. Lincoln sounds safe, right? Landlocked, green. The kind of place where people have lawns and actually water them. But beneath those lawns is a ticking time bomb called the Ogallala Aquifer. And it's draining faster than your retirement account during a recession. Lincoln sits at the edge of one of the largest underground freshwater reserves in the world, emphasis on was. The Ogallala stretches from South Dakota to Texas, and for decades, it's been the lifeblood of American agriculture. Corn, wheat, cattle. All of it depends on this ancient water. But here's the problem. Farmers are pumping water out 10 times faster than nature can refill it. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, parts of the Ogallala have dropped over 150 feet since the 1950s. In some areas of Kansas and Texas, it's already functionally gone. Nebraska is still sitting pretty poor now. But Lincoln-esque growth is putting pressure on a system that was never designed for suburbs and strip malls. So why 2030? Because agricultural demand is accelerating and municipal usage is climbing. The aquifer doesn't care about your new cul-de-sac. When the farms go dry, the breadbasket becomes a dust bowl. And when the dust bowl comes, property values follow. Picture this, you move to Lincoln for the affordable housing and good schools. 5 years later, water rationing kicks in. Your lawn turns brown. Your neighbors start drilling private wells until the city bans that too. Then the farms outside town start failing. Food prices spike. Jobs disappear. And suddenly, your $150,000 home is worth whatever someone is willing to pay to live in a modern dust bowl. One Redditor put it perfectly. I moved here because it was boring and safe. Now, I am watching my neighbor's well go dry while the city pretends everything's fine. The corn's still growing, but for how long? And here's the kicker. Lincoln's also dealing with increasing drought conditions, hotter summers, and a state government more focused on protecting agricultural interests than planning for the future. Is it worth buying into the heartland if the heart is running out of blood? And if you think the middle of the country is safe, wait until you see what's happening to Florida's so-called endless water supply. Spoiler, the ocean is coming for it. Number 11. Miami, Florida. Miami has plenty of water. It's literally surrounded by the stuff. Atlantic Ocean on one side, Everglades on the other. So how could Miami possibly have a water crisis? Simple. You can't drink the ocean, and the ocean is coming for everything else. Miami sits on top of the Biscayne Aquifer, a porous limestone sponge that supplies drinking water to over 6 million people in South Florida. But here's the thing about porous limestone. It doesn't stop salt water as sea levels rise. That salt water is pushing inland, contaminating the fresh water supply from below. This is called saltwater intrusion, and it's already happening. The South Florida Water Management District has documented the salt front moving steadily westward, about 1,000 feet per year in some areas. Wells that were fresh a decade ago are now too salty to use. The county has had to shut down and relocate well fields multiple times. By 2030, some models suggest the intrusion could compromise up to 15% of Miami-Dade's primary water supply, and that's the optimistic scenario. Now imagine the horror show. You buy a condo in Brickell because you love the nightlife and the beach, but your water bill starts climbing because desalination is expensive. Then they announce restrictions. Then your building's plumbing starts corroding from the mineral content. Then your property insurance gets canceled because, oh right, the whole city is also flooding every high tide. A local posted this gem. My building keeps saying the water's fine, but my coffee tastes like the ocean threw up in it. I'm paying $3,500 a month for salt water with a view. And here is what makes it worse. Miami's infrastructure is built on the assumption that water will always be there. The city has no major backup plan, no desalination capacity at scale, no way to retreat from the coast, just vibes and high rises. When your aquifer turns into brine, what's your beach house really worth? If Miami's drowning in the wrong kind of water, the next city is fighting a losing battle against the desert itself, armed with nothing but desalination and an aisle. Number 10. El Paso, Texas. El Paso is the poster child for desert living done sort of right. They've won awards for water conservation. They recycle wastewater. They build a massive desalination plant. They're trying, really trying. But you can't engineer your way out of geography. El Paso sits at the western tip of Texas, wedged between New Mexico and Mexico, in one of the driest regions in North America. Average annual rainfall? About 9 inches. For context, that's less than some cities get in a single storm. The city relies on a mix of the Rio Grande, the Hooco-Bolson aquifer, and increasingly, desalinated brackish groundwater. Here's the problem. The Rio Grande barely reaches El Paso anymore. Upstream diversions, drought, and climate change have turned the Grand River into a sad trickle for most of the year. And the Hooco-Bolson, it's being pumped dry. Studies suggest the freshwater portion could be depleted by 2030 or shortly after. That leaves desalination. El Paso S.K. Bailey Hutchison Desalination Plant is the largest inland facility of its kind in the world. Impressive, right? Sure, until you realize that desalination costs about 3 to 4 times more than traditional water treatment, and it requires enormous amounts of energy in a state where the power grid fails every time it gets too hot or too cold. So what happens when the aquifer is gone and the salt plant is running at max capacity? Rationing, skyrocketing utility bills, economic stagnation, and property values that crater faster than you can say liquid gold. A resident shared this. They keep telling us we're water smart, but my bill is for $100 a month, and I'm taking 5-minute showers in a house I can barely afford. Smart for who? Throw in extreme heat. El Paso regularly hits 100 degrees Fahrenheit or higher in summer dust storms, and a struggling local economy, and you've got a city desperately treading water. Literally. Is the desert lifestyle worth it when every drop costs $1? El Paso's at least trying to solve the problem. The next city. They let the oil industry drink first and the residents get whatever's left. Number 9. Midland and Odessa, Texas. Welcome to the Permian Basin, where the oil flows freely and the water doesn't. Midland and Odessa are twin cities built on black gold for decades. That meant prosperity, big trucks, big money, big houses, but there's a problem with building your entire economy around sucking things out of the ground. Eventually, you run out. And in West Texas, they're running out of water way before they run out of oil. Hydraulic fracking requires enormous volumes of water. We're talking millions of gallons per well. And in a region that gets about 14 inches of rain per year, those millions have to come from somewhere. That somewhere is the same aquifers that supply drinking water to Midland and Odessa. The Texas Water Development Board has warned that groundwater levels in the region are declining at unsustainable rates. Some areas have seen drops of over 100 feet in just the past decades. And here is the sick irony. The oil industry can afford to pay more for water than residents can. So, when supplies get tight, guess who wins? By 2030, projections suggest that without significant intervention, the region could face severe municipal water shortages. The oil field will keep drilling, but the people who live there might not have enough water to flush their toilets. The horror scenario writes itself. You move to Midland for the oil boom jobs, housing prices spike, then the water restrictions hit. Your lawn dies. Your neighborhood starts looking like a post-apocalyptic movie set. Property values collapse just as the oil jobs start drying up too. You're stuck in a brown, dusty suburb with no water and no exit strategy. One local put it bluntly, "We've got oil millionaires watering their ranches while my kid's school has water fountains that don't work." Tell me how that's fair. And it's not just the water table. Midland Odessa also deals with some of the worst air quality in Texas, extreme heat, and an economy that booms and busts with oil prices. Would you bet your family's future on a town where the oil company's thirst comes before yours? If Midland is sacrificing water for oil, the next city is about to poison itself with its own dying lake. And I mean that literally. Number 8. Salt Lake City, Utah. Salt Lake City sounds like it has plenty of water, right? There's literally a giant lake in the name. But here's the thing about the Great Salt Lake. You can't drink it. It's saltier than the Dead Sea. And right now, it's dying, which is somehow even worse than it sounds. The Great Salt Lake has lost about 73% of its water since 1847. It is currently at its lowest level ever recorded. And if it keeps shrinking, it won't just disappear, it'll turn into a toxic dust-bombed sea. The lake bed is full of heavy metals, arsenic, mercury, lead for thousands of years. That stuff stayed safely underwater, but as the lake dries up, that contaminated sediment becomes exposed, wind picks it up, and suddenly, 2.5 million people in the Salt Lake Valley are breathing poison. A 2023 study from Brigham Young University found that arsenic concentrations in the exposed lake bed are high enough to pose serious health risks. We're talking increased cancer rates, respiratory disease, neurological damage. This isn't speculation, this is chemistry, and it gets worse. Salt Lake City depends on snowpack from the Wasatch Mountains for its drinking water. But snowpack is declining due to climate change. The city is growing rapidly, one of the fastest in the country. Demand is up, supply is down, and there's a ticking arsenic time bomb in the backyard. By 2030, experts warn the lake could reach a point of no return where evaporation outpaces any possible recovery. Picture this: you buy a beautiful home with a view of the mountains, great schools, growing tech sector, lots of outdoor recreation. Then the dust storms start. The air quality alerts become daily. Your kids are developing asthma. Your property insurance skyrockets. And no one wants to buy your house because they've seen the news. A local Redditor nailed it. I moved here for the nature. Now, nature is trying to kill me with arsenic. My Zillow estimate drops every time there's a news story about the lake. Is a thriving tech hub worth it if the air itself becomes a liability? And if Salt Lake is watching its lake become poison, the next city already ran out of water entirely. This is what day zero actually looks like. Number 7. Coalinga, California. Coalinga, California is the ghost of water future. While other cities on this list are worried about running out of water by 2030, Coalinga already did. Years ago, this isn't a warning, it's a preview. Coalinga is a small city in California's Central Valley, population around 18,000. It was built on oil and agriculture to industries that need water. Like lungs need air, but the Central Valley has been in a water crisis for decades. And Coalinga got hit hardest. The city's wells started failing, aquifer levels dropped, and then, the unthinkable, Coalinga became one of the first American cities to rely almost entirely on trucked-in water. That's right, for years. Residents have watched tanker trucks rumble through town delivering the most basic human necessity. Water is delivered to filling stations where people fill containers and haul them home. Some homes have cisterns, others just have buckets, and the cost, astronomical. Coalinga residents pay some of the highest water rates in California, sometimes over $1,000 per month for a family. For water you can barely use, water that comes from a truck. So what happened to property values? They collapsed. Homes that were worth $150 zero during the housing boom can now be had for under $100 zero if anyone's buying at all. Businesses left, young people left. What remains is a town slowly hollowing out. A resident posted this: people don't understand what it's like to budget for water like it's rent. Shower, laundry, cooking, every drop is a decision. This isn't living, this is surviving. And here's the darkest part: Coalinga isn't unique, it's just ahead of schedule. Dozens of Central Valley communities are on the same trajectory. The aquifer is still dropping, the snowpack is still shrinking, and the state is still fighting over who gets what's left. Coalinga is what happens when a town hits day zero and the outside world just moves on. Would you buy a home in a town where water comes from a truck and hope comes from nowhere? If Coalinga is the past, the next city is the future's nightmare. the fastest growing place with the least amount of water to support it. Number 6. St. George, Utah. St. George is a paradox wrapped in red rocks and the Nile. It's one of the fastest growing cities in America. Beautiful desert scenery, warm winters, endless golf courses. Retirees love it. Remote workers love it. Developers love it. The only problem, there's almost no water, and nobody seems to care. St. George sits in Utah's Dixie region, a gorgeous slice of high desert that gets about 8 inches of rain per year. For context, that's less than Tucson. The city relies primarily on the Virgin River and local reservoirs, which are increasingly stressed by drought and population growth. Washington County, where St. George is located, has nearly tripled in population since 1990, and it is still growing at around 3% per year, one of the highest rates in the nation. All those new homes need water. All those golf courses need water. All those hotel pools need water. The solution? For years, Utah has been planning the Lake Powell Pipeline, a massive $2 billion project to pipe water from an already stressed Lake Powell to St. George. But the pipeline has faced endless delays, legal challenges, environmental concerns, and the inconvenient fact that Lake Powell itself is rapidly shrinking. By 2030, experts project St. George will face significant water shortages with or without the pipeline. The math simply doesn't work. You can't grow a city at 3% per year in a place that gets 8 inches of rain and expect magic. The horror scenario is already unfolding. Water rates in St. George have increased dramatically. New developments face stricter requirements, and some long-term residents are watching their property values stagnate as the water writing appears on the wall. A local shared this. Everyone keeps moving here for the lifestyle, but nobody asks where the water comes from. My neighbors water their lawns at midnight like it's a crime, because basically, it is. And it's not just water. St. George also deals with extreme heat, wildfire risk, and the looming threat of Lake Powell's collapse, which would devastate the entire Colorado River system. Is a desert paradise worth anything when the paradise part requires water that doesn't exist? And speaking of Lake Powell, let's talk about the city that's bet everything on an even bigger illusion, Las Vegas. Number 5. Las Vegas, Nevada. Las Vegas is the greatest magic trick in American history. A city of 2.3 million people, with world-famous fountains, endless pools, and lush golf courses built in the middle of a desert that gets 4 inches of rain per year. For decades, the trick worked. Vegas became the master of water recycling, capturing and reusing nearly every drop that goes down an indoor drain. The city has actually reduced its water consumption while growing in population. On paper, it's a conservation success story. But there's one problem, Lake Mead. And Lake Mead is dying. Lake Mead provides about 90% of Las Vegas's water supply. It's the largest reservoir in the United States by capacity, or at least it was. Since 2000, Lake Mead has dropped over 180 feet. As of 2024, it sits below 35% capacity. The iconic bathtub ring of white mineral deposits on the canyon walls shows just how much water has vanished. The Bureau of Reclamation has already declared water shortage conditions, triggering mandatory cuts to Nevada's allocation. Vegas is getting less water every year, and there's no guarantee the cuts will stop. And here's the terrifying part. Lake Mead doesn't just supply water, it also powers Hoover Dam, which provides electricity to Nevada, Arizona, and California. If the lake drops below 895 feet, the dead pool level, the dam stops generating power entirely. Vegas could lose water and electricity at the same time. By 2030, under continued drought conditions, Lake Mead could approach or reach dead pool. The city that never sleeps might become the city that never drinks. A Vegas resident put it simply, we recycle everything. We rent out our lawn. We take 3-minute showers. And still, the lake keeps dropping. At some point, conservation isn't enough. Throw in extreme heat, Vegas regularly hits 115% rising energy costs, and an economy built on tourism. That requires constant excess, and you've got a house of cards built on a dry lake bed. Is the Strip worth anything if the taps run dry and the lights go out? If Vegas is a magic trick, the next city is a warning from across the border, a glimpse of what happens when you ignore hydrology for too long. Number 4. Mexico City, Mexico. This one's technically not in the United States, But pay attention anyway because Mexico City is the ghost of Christmas future. For every American city on this list, it's what happens when you pump too much groundwater for too long. The city literally starts sinking. Mexico City is home to over 21 million people, making it one of the largest metropolitan areas on Earth. It was built on a drain lake bed, the ancient Lake Texcoco, and for decades, it relied on underground aquifers for drinking water. Simple enough, right? Wrong. The city has pumped so much water from below that the ground is compressing. Mexico City is sinking at a rate of up to 20 inches per year in some areas. Buildings are tilting, streets are cracking, water mains are rupturing. The very foundation of the city is collapsing, and the cruel irony, as the city sinks, the aquifers become harder to access. Wells have to be drilled deeper, extraction costs go up, water quality goes down, and the city just keeps sinking. By 2030, Mexico City could face catastrophic infrastructure failures. Some neighborhoods may become uninhabitable. Water rationing, already common, could become permanent for millions of residents. The city may have to essentially rebuild itself while simultaneously running out of water. This isn't speculation, this is happening right now. A Mexico City resident shared this. We get water 2 days a week, sometimes less. We collect rainwater, we reuse everything, and still, my building's foundation cracked last year. We're not living in a city, we're living on borrowed time. So why should Americans care? Because Phoenix is pumping groundwater, because the Central Valley is pumping groundwater, because every city on this list is making the same bet Mexico City made, that you can extract water from the earth forever without consequences. Mexico City is the answer to that bet. The answer is no. Is your 30-year mortgage worth anything if the ground beneath your house is literally disappearing? And if Mexico City is the warning, the next entry is the proof that the warning has already been ignored. In Arizona, the water wars have already started and some residents just got cut off. Number 3. Rio Verde Foothills, Arizona. Rio Verde Foothills isn't a city that's running out of water. It's a community that already got cut off. The tap didn't run dry, it got turned off by the neighbors. Rio Verde Foothills is an unincorporated community just east of Scottsdale, Arizona. It's beautiful. High desert, mountain views, custom homes on large lots. For years, residents relied on Scottsdale to sell them water, which was trucked in by private haulers. A weird system, but it worked. Then, in January 2023, Scottsdale said no more. Facing its own water shortage projections, Scottsdale announced it would stop selling water to outside communities. Rio Verde Foothills was cut off overnight. No warning, no transition plan, just no water. Some residents scrambled to drill wells expensive and often dry. Others started buying water from private vendors at astronomical prices. A few just left. The community descended into chaos, finger-pointing, and lawsuits. This is what day zero looks like in America. Not a gradual decline, not a government program, just a water supply that vanishes because someone upstream decided they needed it more. And here's the kicker, Rio Verde Foothills was never supposed to work. It was a libertarian fever dream, unincorporated, unregulated, no municipal water system, no backup plan. Residents bought cheap land, built dream homes, and assumed the water would always be there. It wasn't. A resident posted this. I spent $800,000 on my house. Now, I'm paying $1,000 a month for trucked water that might stop at any time. My property is worth nothing. I can't sell. I can't stay. This is what happens when you believe the brochure. And the worst part, this could happen anywhere. Any unincorporated community. Any subdivision that relies on water from a neighboring city. Any place where the water rights weren't locked in. Rio Verde Foothills is the canary in the coal mine. Except the canary didn't die, it just got evicted. Would you buy a home in a place where your water supply depends on someone else's generosity? If Rio Verde is the proof of concept, the next city is the full-scale experiment. Phoenix is the hubris of man, condensed into 500 square miles of sun-baked sprawl. Number 2. Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix, Arizona is the greatest act of hydrological defiance in human history. 5 million people living in a valley where summer temperatures exceed 115 F, where rainfall averages about 8 inches a year, and where the only reason any of it works is a network of canals, reservoirs, and groundwater pumping. That would make a Roman engineer weep for decades. Phoenix has grown and grown, one of the fastest expanding metros in America. People came for the sunshine, the cheap housing, the jobs. They built subdivisions, golf courses, data centers, all assuming the water would keep flowing. It won't. Arizona has operated under the 1980 Groundwater Management Act, which requires new developments to prove they have a 100-year assured water supply. Sounds responsible, right? But in 2023, Arizona's own analysis concluded that the Phoenix metro area is facing a massive groundwater deficit. There isn't enough water to support the growth that's already been approved, let alone future development. The state has now restricted new construction in some areas that rely on groundwater. Developers are scrambling. Home prices in water-stressed suburbs are starting to wobble, and the fundamental math is finally catching up. Phoenix relies on a combination of Colorado River water, Lake Mead declining, Salt River project water drought stressed, and groundwater now officially insufficient. All three pillars are cracking. By 2030, Phoenix will face mandatory cutbacks from the Colorado River, declining reservoir levels, and a groundwater system that can't make up the difference. Some subdivisions will face severe restrictions. Property values and water in certain areas could plummet. A Phoenix resident nailed it. I moved here in 2020 because it was affordable. Now, I can't water my yard. My HOA is suing people for dead lawns. And my neighbor just sold his house for $50,000 less than he paid. The dream is over. Add in extreme heat, dust storms, wildfire smoke from California, and a housing market built on the assumption of infinite expansion. And you've got a city running on borrowed time and borrowed water. Is the American dream worth chasing if it's built on a mirage? And if Phoenix is the hubris, the next city is the punchline. The ultimate Ponzi scheme, selling homes with water that doesn't exist. Number 1. Buckeye, Arizona. Buckeye, Arizona is the number 1 city on this list for one simple reason. It's a Ponzi scheme that's about to collapse. They race selling homes, tens of thousands of them with assured water supply certificates that don't actually assure anything. This isn't a water crisis. It's fraud with a sunset view. Buckeye sits on the western fringe of the Phoenix metro, and for years, it's been the poster child for Sun Belt growth. Population has more than quadrupled since 2000. Master plan communities stretch to the horizon. Billboards promise affordable family living and desert paradise. Developers can't build homes fast enough, but here's the scam. Many of these developments were approved under Arizona's assured water supply rules, which sounded strict until you looked closely. Developers could claim water supplies that were purely theoretical, groundwater that might exist, future allocations that might be approved, paper water that might never materialize. In 2023, Arizona finally admitted what hydrologists had known for years: there isn't enough groundwater to support the growth already approved in areas like Buckeye. The state has paused new approvals, but the damage is done. Thousands of homes are already built or under construction with water supplies that exist only on paper. By 2030, Buckeye could be ground zero for the American water crisis. As groundwater levels drop and Colorado River cuts deepen, these new subdivisions will face restrictions, rationing, potentially catastrophic property devaluation. People who bought in 2022 thinking they were getting a deal may find themselves holding worthless assets in a ghost town. The horror scenario isn't hypothetical, it's baked in. You buy a $400,000 home in a shiny new development. 3 years later, water restrictions hit. Your lawn dies. Your pool becomes a liability. Your HOA fees skyrocket to cover water trucking. Your neighbors start leaving. And when you try to sell, no one's buying because everyone knows the water's running out. A Buckeye resident shared this. We moved here because it was the only place we could afford. Now, they're telling us the water we were promised might not exist. What are we supposed to do? Just abandon our lives? Yes. That might be exactly what happens. Buckeye isn't just a warning. It's the inevitable conclusion of building cities in places where cities shouldn't exist, with water that was never really there. Would you buy a home backed by a promise written in disappearing ink? You came here expecting a list of cities with water problems. What you got was a preview of the next American migration, except this time, people won't be moving toward opportunity. They'll be fleeing scarcity. Every city on this list made the same bet, that water would always be there, that someone else would solve the problem, that growth could continue forever. They were wrong. So, before you buy that house in the desert, that condo near the coast, that investment property in the Sun Belt, ask yourself one question: where does the water come from? Because if you don't know the answer, you might be holding a deed to the next ghost town. The tap is running dry, and in some places, it's already too late.